Hello and welcome back to Jo's Art History Podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical with me, your host, and your resident art historian, Jo McLaughlin. Welcome back everyone, it is episode 50. That is right, we are the big 50. Really huge achievement in terms of podcasting, and considering I think on average most podcasts kind of bow out at the 8 or 9 episode mark. So to still be standing strong at 50 with so much more to go, just have to thank each and every one of you for listening and supporting. And for our 50th episode, I really couldn't think of a better way to celebrate creativity and art history and doing what you love than by speaking with my wonderful guest this week, Sara McKee. Sara is an art historian and gallerist and is the founder of a wonderful gallery called Life Full Colour, which is based in a small village called Caernarfon in Wales. Sara studied art history at university, but like a lot of art historians, they, air quotes, get a real job once their degree is over. And Sara ended up in a long career within the advertising and marketing industry. However, after a series of rather heartbreaking events in the mid-2000s, Sara decided it was time to return to her first love, art history, and she began living her life full colour. This is a brilliant episode for anyone who is feeling a little lack of inspiration, who feels the need for community and connection, and Sara speaks beautifully about what her gallery, Life Full Colour, is achieving in just such a short space of time. This is a really special episode, one which, upon stopping the recording, I kind of had to walk around for a little bit just to sort of work off the energy. It's a really uplifting one, and I always love meeting people in the art world who shake things up and try and show everybody that art really is for everybody. And Life Full Colour and Sara and her team at the gallery are certainly doing just that. More importantly, they're building a community where creativity is the crux of what is going on. And it's beautiful. So just sit back and relax as I introduce you to the wonderful Sara McKee and her gallery, Life Full Colour. Something that I've been thinking about because I'm in the minute of looking for a new job. So I studied art history. I've worked in an art gallery for the past 6 and a bit years, and I decided to take a little bit of time off and still want to work in the art world, but like look in a new direction. So I've been thinking a lot about careers in the art world, and I want to talk to you about when you studied art history. Did you know that was something at school that you could study? Were your tutors, I don't know, wise to the fact that was a subject that you could study? Because for me, it was a chance conversation. That's how I came across art history, was when I was at a university open day and someone gave me the time of day to have a conversation about it. So how did art history find its way to you?
Random. I went to a private girls' school, an independent girls' school in Manchester, and I was average at everything to do with maths and science and not too bad at English and that sort of side. My sister was a straight A. She was 3 years older than me, straight A's all the way through. So I became captain of hockey instead.
Nice. I've got one of those sisters as well. She now lives in Paris and speaks about 9 languages. Yep.
Well, my sister is a primary school teacher and does it brilliantly. But I think when we were at school, I was always compared and contrasted. So up to my O levels, it was all a bit grim, if I'm honest. And in hindsight, my parents have said that actually they probably should have sent us to 2 different schools rather than the same one, which is lovely when you're in your 50s. But hey, we are where we are. But I was very fortunate in that in my A level year, I did English and ancient history and literature. And I had 2 incredibly inspiring women. My English teacher had recently got divorced, so that was quite interesting because she changed her name back to her original name. So, but she was a theatre goer. She was a massive reader. She was the sort of person that was probably akin to that Robin Williams teacher character that would throw our arms about and get really into the stuff. So when I was doing Hamlet for A-level, I could recite most of it. So I remember that my exam, my A-level exam, I wrote 21 quotes in an essay on Hamlet. And I'm not brilliant and I don't do that sort of thing, but she was so inspiring that you just got under the skin of the thing and you understood it and you wanted to read more of it. And alongside her partner in crime was a lady called Merle Tong, who was about the same age as my parents. Again, a single mum, but she looked like something that you'd see characterized now in a Harry Potter movie.
Really?
Very close cropped black hair, always wore her. It wasn't one of those schools where the teachers wore the gowns all the time, but she kind of did.
Right.
And she spoke Latin, Greek, all the classics, and she did this ancient history and literature A-level. And she taught me how to write, and she taught me how to think. So I went from O-level learn by rote to these two women who basically told me to think for myself and not just take what anybody told me as the gospel. And we used to go to the theatre together. About half a dozen of us taking the A-levels and these two women. And in Manchester, there's the Royal Exchange Theatre. And it's amazing. It's a theatre in the round, built in the old Royal Exchange kind of market, really. And you can sit so close. You know, the guys in the plays come virtually and sit next to you in between what they're doing, and it's so immersive. And when you're kind of 17 or 18, and you've got these two enthusiasts feeding at you, it was just incredible. And I had no idea what I was going to do. My parents were completely dysfunctional. They were going through their own problems at the time. So I was getting no kind of advice or guidance. My sister had gone to university in Leeds and read English, so that was fine. She was away. So these two women were seminal, really, in what I was going to do next. And back in the 80s, you had a careers tutor who you went to see, hadn't a Scooby-Doo of what was going on anywhere else in the world, really. And it was those two that said, have you thought about history of art? Because you love going to galleries, you love looking at paintings, you read stuff about it. And it was integral to both the English stuff. I did take art A-level, but I was rubbish at it. But the bit that was really inspiring was in ancient history, I was taught to read the classics in the style of reading newspapers. So if you're reading a story from ancient history, Herodotus will say something about it, Thucydides will, and so will Socrates. So who do you believe? So it's a bit like there's the Times version, the Telegraph version, or rather, shall we say, the Times version, the Daily Mail, and the Sun, and then make your own mind up by reading all three. So that's why I say I was taught to write and think for myself that way. And then they suggested art history, and then I started to look for courses, and I went to various interviews back in the day, and I went to Warwick. Now, Warwick University, if you've been in recent years, is enormous and well developed and all the rest of it. It was a building site in the 80s. There was the art centre was probably the only thing that was there, and then lots of horrible concrete buildings. And it was in the middle of nowhere. It was in the middle of loads of fields of nothingness on the outskirts of Coventry. So there was nothing appealing about it in terms of location. And we get there, and I'm thinking, I don't want to live in the middle of it. You know, I've been brought up going to school in the centre of Manchester here with all these amenities.
It's too quiet.
And anyway, I met this. I was interviewed by a lady who's an expert in French painting called Anthea Callum. I think she lives in Australia these days. But she was just really incredible, really amazing. And one of the things about the art history course in Warwick was you went to Venice for 6 months, or probably a term of 3.5 months, but you could go either side of it. So I was interviewed by her and I said enough sensible things and my grades were going to look reasonable. And then she said, but why would you choose Warwick? And I said, well, I'd certainly not do it for the location and the look and feel of the place. But I said, to be fair, the opportunity to go to Venice for 6 months is quite appealing. And she laughed and said, my God, you're the first person that's owned up to that bit. So that was, I didn't get exactly the grades, but I got in. And when I got to know Anthea really, really well. And she's written some of the most really interesting books on how to paint, how the sort of Courbet and that sort of era of the French painters painted. And I wanted to do her course in my third year. You sort of focus on one area. And she decided to have a sabbatical.
Oh.
So she had a summer party, and to go to Venice, you had to get to a certain level of Italian. And for some reason, well, in my youth, I'd gone on holiday. I'd gone on an exchange thing where my father had organised for my sister to go and stay with a French family, and she hated it and came home. Being awkward, I just said, I don't want to go to France, can I go to Italy? So he found me a family and I stayed over there. So from the ages of about 14, 15, I was going over there with not a word of Italian and people holding things up for me and telling me what they were called, you know, until Pigeon Wise, a few years in, and they were lovely people, but they didn't speak any English. So by the time I got to university, I spoke Pidgin Italian with a very good Italian accent, apparently. So they layered on the grammar and the rest of it. So I came top. It had a distinction and had knocked out the spots of everybody and all the marks for the Italian, just because it kind of flowed a bit.
Yeah.
And so I remember going, Anthea was the next one to my two form teachers in a sense, because she came running down the path and said, a distinction, stunning. And I said, well, I had to do that because I've got to go to Venice now and go do something Italian, haven't I? Because you're buggering off. So I suppose from the age of 16, 17, I was treated like a grown-up by these people.
Yeah.
And just encouraged it. And the sort of teaching and that I had at Warwick was very much about, don't believe what we say, look at it for yourself. And my prof, Julian, who's long retired now, lives in Oxford, I've been seeing for lunch on several occasions. He'll email me and say, I'm coming to see my favourite painting in Liverpool, we should do lunch. So I'll drive into Liverpool. But he's, I mean, clearly erudite scholar, knows I'm far too commercial really to be academic, and I'm too noisy, he always says to me. I couldn't possibly go and work in a gallery or in a museum because I'm too noisy. So and he's quite right really. But the key thing for me is when you're surrounded by people with that level of enthusiasm, whatever the sphere of business you're in, it kind of rubs off.
Yeah.
And what Julian always said to me was that you can teach people most things, but you can't train people to have an eye. You've kind of got an eye for colour, and you get it. It can be honed, a bit like, you know, you can learn to draw, but you're never going to be Michelangelo, even with all the practice in the world. But what I've seemed to have been able to do is do the colour and the big picture, and it's worked in all my commercial world. So I can visualize things. I can visualize what a business looks like. I can visualize a building into a gallery, like we've done in Caernarfon. And it's not always useful because some people can't work with you because they just don't understand where you are in your head. If you speak to my partner Rebecca, she'll just say, "Can we have a bit of a brain download? Because I'm over here. I kind of know where you're going, but I could just do with catching up."
Yeah.
So I have got in one corporate organisation, I was called the fire starter because I just kept moving, you know, doing another thing, and it's not always a good thing to do, really.
Yeah.
But it's those sort of, you know, my university was transformational, that experience.
I mean, it really sounds it, and I love that you were encouraged to think for yourself. That's something that didn't happen for me until I was in my 20s. And when it did happen, it was a revelation. Question, don't take anything as gospel. And it really
Yeah.
came when I did my master's. But I'm interested. So I've been speaking to your partner Rebecca, and she sent me a little blurb just about your life. And she said after university, you got, and she put in air quotes, a real job. And as an art historian, I find this fascinating because when I don't know if you found this now that you've kind of gone back to it. So when I was at university, I had a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you're studying art history. What on earth kind of job can you do with that?" And now when I'm in rooms with lawyers or scientists or whatever, and I say, "Oh, I'm an art historian," suddenly I'm the most interesting person in the room, and everybody thinks what I do is incredible. And I find that flip-flop very interesting. And I'm very at the moment I'm looking into careers and thinking about next steps, and but also the lack of career advice that was available when I was at university, and even really now the internet is a great thing. So I'm wondering, what was your career advice when you were at university? Where did anyone sort of sit you down and say there's so many things that you can do, or were you very much you found yourself very organically heading in a slightly different direction once you graduated?
No, I mean, I graduated in 1987. So this is before computers and the internet, and certainly before anybody thought about careers. And when we were all studying like lunatics to get a decent grade at the finish, all of our profs were saying, "Why are you getting so hung up about what degree you get? Just you're here to learn, you're here to open your mind, you're here to do, why are you so worried about getting a job?" And you think, actually, a lot of what they've done is they've moved from, and to be fair, we weren't paying fees either, were we? We were paying our living standards, but we weren't paying the tuition fees. So in a way, you could understand why they were pushing you to just learn and enjoy and immerse rather than worry about the next step. So in terms of the academic staff, forget it, no career thing going there. Prof, however, did get me a job role at the old masters department at Christie's.
Oh, wow.
Which would have been fantastic if they paid you anything. So it was really elitist back then. So you actually had to either have a family who lived in London, so you could just carry on living at home rent free and get your expenses, or you didn't go. And I live in the northwest of England, or my parents did, so that was a non-starter. So I actually went to London and stayed in a friend's flat. Didn't take the job, but tried to find work so that I could gradually build up to it. And partly did that because so many of my friends were from London, but they weren't from. So they went home, but they didn't go home to the centre of London. They went home to Essex, or they went home to Wimbledon or wherever it was. So actually, the idea of having this, you'll meet up after work for a drink kind of thing, was pathetic. And most people are, even if we did it once a week, they were all off at 8 o'clock. And you just think, God, we're only in here. So anyway, long story short, I mail-shotted myself. My father had been in sales and marketing all his life, and suggested actually that why didn't I try advertising, the advertising industry. So they used to have a directory, a book, not online. So I mail-shotted myself to about 100 advertising and PR agencies in the Northwest, and got my first 3 jobs out of that exercise. The first one was a nightmare. It was in a tiny little village in Lancashire. The upside was there was nowhere to rent, so I bought my first house.
Wow.
My pay package was 4,000 a year, and I bought this house for 10,450 quid as a repossession. It had no central heating. It was like living as a student again, but it got me on the property ladder. And 18 months later, I sold it for 30 grand.
Wow.
So a part of the job was a disaster, but that was the upside. I then got jobs in the centre of Manchester, and it's kind of the alternative creative environment. I was a copywriter to start with, but actually I'm much better as a trader. So very quickly they turned me over to the account management side, and I built up accounts and I won business. And I'm, there was well, probably still is, but there was a huge amount of misogyny then. There were very few women account managers or account directors. Women didn't help other women. So there was no business about I'll help you up the next run. No, it's kill or be killed in the whole setup. So to get a promotion, you had to actually move job. So I moved jobs probably every 2 years, and got the next level up, to the point at which when was it? It must have been early 90s. I won this client. It was a big computer company, and they asked me to go and be marketing director. So I flipped to the other side, flipped to the dark side, and did loads of commercial stuff. And ever since then, I've done commercial vision, strategy, that sort of thing for all the different businesses I went into. I've done lots of startups. Did a startup low fare airline. Opened retail stores for this computer one. I've worked in consumer electronics. I've worked in welfare to work, policy, housing and social care. So I've done all sorts of different things, but my job's always been transformation. What does it look like in the next 5 or 10 years? Mm-hmm. And people can't do that. People find vision, strategy really tough. They're always in the weeds. They can't look up and out. So the thing I learned quite late actually was you actually have to delegate an awful lot, because somebody needs to be looking 5 years out. So that's what I'm good at. What I'm not good at is planning the day-to-day program of what we're doing on Tuesday and have we got enough sugar cubes and all the rest of it. So I need people who are really good at that and manage that really well and love that level of detail. So and Rebecca, God love her, she's a trained journalist. That's her degree. She's worked in PR, but she's always been a campaigning PR person.
Right.
And she's worked with me in a lot of my corporate jobs. And we just, I don't know, she is the polar opposite to me. She is the person that keeps the wheels down and doesn't stop me doing anything. She'd say in this call that she'd be riding on my coattails for the last 15, 20 years. But actually, she's the one that's probably stopped me doing anything completely ridiculous. And, she hates me going on holiday for more than a few days because I get bored and then I start thinking of the next thing. So
I find your career history incredible, because in the back of everything, the love of art was still there. It didn't, and you do need this, I think, in order to think 5 years in advance or 5 steps in advance. And I think that's something I'm quite good at. Particularly when I'm installing something or a situation happens, I can think 6 steps in advance. And when someone says, let's do this, I'll say, no, we can't do that because X, Y, Z. We have to do this first.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much a creative mind, but you still had this love of art, and you traveled the world and still visited galleries and saw all these things.
Yeah, I mean, so I worked in Israel for a few years, off and on, going back every, 6 weeks for a week. And that's a completely different culture again. And some of the museums, they're phenomenal. And once in your life, you need to go and do the Holocaust Museum. It takes about 4 hours to go around it. And it's absolute. I mean, I remember my husband saying that they should have a bar at the end of it that served free whiskey tops and brandy, because it's so exhausting and amazing. But I love different arts and cultures and food, and just like being taken to things by people who I work with over there. And that was great. Go to New York to my friends over there. All through my corporate life, there was always that people have different interests, and once you get to know people a bit better, you find out what some of them are very spiritual. So my friend Tammy is doing a whole load of spiritual stuff these days, Another friend, Bill, who I've worked with for years, his wife is an artist, and they live up in Ithaca in New York State, and their friends are all creative. You know, Helena Cooper, you may have heard of, she does nature photography, painting. Her husband's a poet. So you surround yourself, and they all play music. I can't play music, but you know, I always said to Rebecca that when you see me with a banjo, just shoot me. But you know, they're all really creative people, and we rub off against each other. And you know, we do business to earn a living, but it's always been surrounded by that type of creativity that you know, makes your heart sing, really. You know.
Yeah, I find I know a lot of people, particularly people I studied with, that had got a degree in art history or studied their masters with me in art business, which is, from reading, sounds a little similar to what you did. And I think the person that ran your course at Christie's founded my course at Kingston.
Oh, right, excellent.
We'll come on to that. But I find there's a guilt that runs through people, that they feel if they've stepped away from it to earn a living elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, do you have any advice for anybody that feels that has that guilt, that's listening, that perhaps, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 people in particular that when I speak with them, that they feel so sad that they haven't been able to pursue a career in there, and they've ended up going in a different direction, but the love is still there.
Well, I think for me, it's I mean, I've always wanted to write a book, but I haven't got the discipline. I know I have to sit down and write a bloody book, and I won't do it because I'll be doing all sorts of other things. So maybe when I hit 70, I might write the book. But the passion doesn't go. You know, that wherever we used to go on holiday, you know, we bring back art, whether it's a pot, a painting. We've been to see whatever is available while we're there. We'll be sunbathing, we'll be having great food, we'll be doing whatever. But there's always been an art element to what we did. And we always plan. I mean, we were planning stuff right up until, you know, my husband died. We were off to go and see a Canova. You know, we were doing all the V's in northern Italy, you know. But I think you've got to be quite pragmatic about earning a living. But it doesn't mean to say that you bin your creativity. I've used colouring in and mind mapping and everything. I mean, I have a finance guy who is 2 days apart from me in birthdays. We are very, very similar in so many ways, but he's an accountant.
Yeah,
that's what he does. He drills his brain left every day. But his first, in any meeting, it was always a race to see who would pick up the marker pen first and start drawing things on the flip chart, because we both thought in the visual. And that you can use your visual and your art history and all that anecdotal stuff. So all the classics I did at school were brilliant to go into all of that Renaissance art that you do in art history, and understanding, you know, if you went to Sunday school as a child, then even those Bible stories come in handy in art history, don't they? So, you know, I'll joke to the vicar this morning that the only reason I know anything about symbolism in the scriptures is because of art history. It's not because I've been to church often enough.
True. And I actually picked one of my subjects in first year was biblical studies. And it's not because I'm devoutly Catholic, even though I went to a Catholic school. It was because I was like, if I know these stories inside out, it's going to help me in my art history degree. And it really, really has. Absolutely.
But you see, I've always thought you can take part of having a degree, for me, and certainly what was hammered into me by our lecturers and professors, was it just opening your mind to think differently.
Yeah.
And when I first started out, there weren't that many people who'd been to university, and there weren't that many women who'd been to it still, you know, in the 80s. It was still quite elitist to go to university. It was only top 5% that were going, as it was said. So it was a point of difference, and it was enabling me to get those jobs a bit because I had an extra qualification on my CV. And after what people don't understand is art history was often seen as, you know, it's the thing that the royals do, isn't it? Because you don't have to be that clever to do it, really. It's the media studies of earlier days. And actually it's bloody complicated, and you have to learn different languages, and you have to know more about chemistry than I did as an O-level. So I have an all-rounded skill brain now because of art history. So it's not that I couldn't do it in the way that I'm currently doing it. I am fulfilling a lifetime dream to be able to do my own thing and be surrounded by pictures. And I'm very narrow-minded on what I like and what's going in my gallery. And I can do that because I'm now 55 and I own the bloody building.
Yeah.
But I've never not had things on the wall, art surrounding me, art as part of what my days off were. And the beauty of my last corporate job, I was around the corner from the National Gallery. Oh. So where do you think I had my lunch breaks?
Amazing.
So, if you can get into London, I mean, and I didn't live there, but I was there 2 or 3 days a week probably, then I would go to the theatre. One of my colleagues and I, if we were staying over, we'd see, are there any last minute tickets anywhere? We'd go to the theatre. Or I did loads of policy stuff with Westminster as well, which is much drier. But, any half-hour break I could have, if I was walking back from somewhere, I'd just nip into a gallery. So you don't need to have it as an either or. And the inspiration, and don't stop reading either. I bought this book a few months ago, David Hockney, on The Secret Knowledge, which was all about how you can go abstract if you like. You can do all the creative and foreign stuff now, but not unless you've learned how to do all the basics and learn properly how to draw, how they used to do in the Slade back in the turn of the century. You go and draw bits of sculpture for the first 2 years till you've mastered the form of body. All that stuff you need to do. I mean, I still read masses of stuff. I read lots of fiction, but I still read about subject matter. I'm currently very enamoured with Georgia O'Keeffe. I wanted to go to the exhibition in Paris, but I'll never get there in time.
No, do you not think so? When is it on till the end of the year?
No, yeah, well, it's on till, I think it's like the 6th of January, but, if I lived where you were, I'd be on and off the Eurostar. Yeah. I went with my niece a couple of years ago to the Picasso Rosé Bleu. We went on the Eurostar then.
Oh, right.
Musée d'Orsay. It was like the last 3 days of it.
Really?
So I managed to snuck in. But I'll never get it done this year. But my other business partner, Joanne, who organises all my dull but very important stuff, she when I said, I'll never get to this exhibition, she pinged me a note to say, there's another Georgia O'Keeffe one in Basel later in the year. You can go to that.
Yeah,
fair enough. I've never been there.
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing about these blockbuster shows, though, when everyone's like, oh, I have to get to them. They're such a big ticket name. There's no way it's going to be the last one ever, which is what I was going to say to you. There'll probably be another one, because there was one, I think 2 or 3 years ago at the Tate, which was the first time actually I came across O'Keeffe. And one of my last episodes in season 1 was on O'Keeffe, and an amazing artist, amazing. Yeah. Let's sort of fast forward to 2011, because your life very much sort of flipped on its head. And you've mentioned it briefly. So your husband Stephen sadly passed away, and you were made redundant from your position at work a few months later. That's a lot for anybody. But you, from what Rebecca has written and what she sent me, you had this really, really great sort of, oh, okay, great. Well, I'll go back to my first love of art history, and you looked at returning to the art world. So can you tell us a little bit about what you did?
Yeah, so I was in a very big corporate job, which, in hindsight, I think I did quite well actually, because I made them loads of money, but I didn't really fit. And then Stephen died in February 2011, and he I don't know whether Rebecca had mentioned, he had a brain the size of a planet. He was a doctor of chemical engineering. He was so clever, it zinged. He was an academic. He worked for AstraZeneca for a while, but his brain was in overload all the time, and eventually it took his life. Well, he took his own life, in fairness. So that happened in February 2011. And then almost to the day, a year later, having done I ran around like a lunatic for a year in the corporate world. My best friend, the finance director, David, used to say to me, have you slept tonight? No, I didn't sleep at all for that first year. I lost gallons of weight, and I kind of had my head down motoring. I then took a week off on the anniversary of his death, and I had a call from my boss. And I thought, oh, nice. And I kind of phoned a friend, as you do, to say, have I misinterpreted this conversation in a way? And it was like, no, you haven't. Right, okay. So that all ended rather badly. But it did, because she'd done it in such a bad way, and they had to pay me a lot of money to go away. So that was when it was actually my brother-in-law who said to me, instead of rushing at it again, because the thing in corporate world is people phone you up and say, would you like a job here instead? And I thought, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. So in a way, she did me a favour because it did the break.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law said, isn't there something you could do that relates back to what you've always wanted to do? So I looked up the Christie's Art for Business course with James, and I thought, actually, do you know what would be quite nice? Even though I live in Cheshire, I can catch the train down. It finishes at 8 o'clock at night, so I can either stay over with somebody I know and have dinner, or just catch the later train home afterwards. So it meant I still had a rhythm of a week where I'd go and do what I used to do, which was lots of travel, but just like less travel. So I invested in that and in myself. And I was the oldest, apart from James, I was the oldest person in the room all the time, because everybody else was like sort of your age or younger, doing a master's and an extra and a what have you. And but it was really interesting. It was such an interesting thing. And I just wanted to ask questions. I wanted to absorb. I wanted to understand. I bought all the books. I think it was a sort of the bit I'd never done. And because I've spent 30 odd years in the commercial environment, where my job has been the commercial bit and understanding how things work and how much it costs and how we make money, I'm probably in a better place now to be able to make something like this work commercially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you kind of have to know what generates the cash and be able to change direction. You know, you open something in the middle of a pandemic, you can't just stay with the original business plan. You've got to be able to move.
There needs to be a degree of flexibility there. But I felt exactly the same. And when I had a look at your course, and it was near enough exactly what I did at Kingston University. So my course was called Art Market Appraisal Professional Practice, which has got to be the longest title of a master's. Anyway, they've changed the title since then. But again, it sounds very similar to what you did, looked at the history of the art market, why the art market ticks the way that it does now. And it's something that we didn't touch on when I studied art history at University.
No, we didn't either.
And it just lit this fire under me that I was like, oh, it's all about branding, and it's all about marketing, and it's all about buying the name. And because that's really, when you think about it, I've worked in an independent art gallery in London, and people do come in and say, okay, so I've got a Moore, I've got a Hepworth, I'm looking for a Lynn Chadwick now. And it's amazing how for some people it is a ticky box exercise, and learning about the people that cottoned onto that really, really early and made it work for them and shaped a very, very fascinating career. So anything to do with the history of the art market or how the art market ticks completely fascinates me. But was it from doing this course was this where the idea of founding the gallery came from? Did you have a sort of aha moment, if you will?
No, no, not at all. Actually, it was probably, I was still very much steeped in the thing I did before, and I'm very passionate, as is Rebecca, about the deinstitutionalisation of care home world. So I did a very quite feisty interview with The Guardian when I left my job, which the writer David Brindle, who is a brilliant social affairs editor, basically wrote. The headline was "No one wants to live in a care home," which is quite interesting when you just left all of that. Yeah. And we still work to try and change the attitude of people, so that once you get older, you don't need to be warehoused, and they shouldn't be building ever bigger warehomes, as we call them. for older people. You don't stuff your granny in a warehouse when she's too difficult to look after. But there's so many people lacking in both the NHS. There's 120,000 vacancies in social care. And it isn't about paying them another £1 an hour. It's about making it a fulfilling career, and nobody's doing that. So Rebecca and I do quite a lot of that still, but mainly working with local authorities and the NHS to change culture and get people thinking that, you know, as I often do when I do these sorts of talks in conference terms, it's all about me. I'm 55. I'm now eligible for social housing. I'm now eligible for the stuff that is retirement, and I've just opened another business. So, you know, think about me and what I will want. And when I do need some extra support, it won't be being given a room where if I want to entertain anybody, they have to sit on the edge of my bed like they did when I was a teenager. You know, so think of me as a consumer, not as that old person. And so that's quite a lot of what we did. So we've got a business called Evermore that we still operate through, but it's about people and vision and doing things. So it all interweaves really. But that was really the priority. It was I kind of couldn't shed the full corporateness straight away, and I hadn't really articulated in my own mind what could I do, because I was too old to go and start working in another gallery or a big organisation like the Christie's and the Phillips of the world. So use my creativity in our existing frame. And it was probably not until about 2017, 2018, I said to Rebecca, can I have a website? Can I just have, because we were talking about, you know, how drab and boring and dreadful all of these places were. And we had this thing about, you know, when I get old, I don't want to wear beige and crimpling. I want to live life in full colour. So that's what we've talked about for the last 8 years. And I said, can I just have a website where I write about the exhibitions I've been to and do book reviews and stuff like that? Just pander to my ego. And she goes, go on then. So she created Life Full Colour as a website. And she knows how to do all that clever stuff. So I'd write things and I'd do, you know, the Bridget Riley review at the Hayward Gallery and all that sort of stuff. So whenever I went anywhere, I'd say what I thought. So not necessarily art historically accurate, but this is what I got out of the exhibition. And we did book reviews and various other bits. And then I went on holiday and I thought, well, we could make an online gallery, and so this is where Rebecca says, you know, this is terrible because you go on holiday for 2 or 3 days, you sleep for the first 2 or 3 days, and then you wake up on day 4 and you're bored and you have an idea and there's only you and the dog.
You've got the flip chart out.
So there I am, I'm on Rightmove, and before I've even had a conversation about where I'm thinking, this looks like a really good place to open a gallery, doesn't it? Oh my. So so probably May 2019, I'm telling her this is what I think we should do next. I'm saying, and she's like, well, how can we afford that? And I went, well, I'm thinking, you know, the way I've done my pension, the pension can buy the building, you know. So commercial head goes into overdrive. So I'm emailing my finance person and I'm doing this, that and the other. So and by the time I get back from my little holiday, which was in Dumfries and Galloway, I'm going around to various parts of North Wales looking at different locations.
That's just amazing.
So I'm just an impulsive, if I'm going to do it, I'll do it now. I had a couple of goes at things that didn't quite work for a variety of reasons. When you get under it, too big, wrong shape, wrong location. And then I tipped up in Caernarfon, which is, you know, I really ought to speak fluent Welsh to be there. But they have been so welcoming because this mad woman turned up, bought this redundant restaurant, painted it yellow and turned it into a gallery. And we're attached to the castle walls, and you know, it's just a joy really, because you just hang out surrounded by art. I decide it's up to me what goes on the walls. I have to like you as a person, and I have to love your work. And you know, some people are much more in the vibe than others, but actually all the people I have artwork for I really like. I can hang out with, I can chat to, talk about what we think we should be doing. They have ideas, I have ideas. And it's become a little tribe, like other places I've operated. It's a little tribe. We all love each other. We want to do the best for the whole. It's not just about, who's bigger or more important or more impressive. And out of which I've gone from finding 2 or 3 artists to start with to we've got an entire program for next year. So I can legitimately say to anybody who comes in, how do I get in your gallery? Well, I have to start to get to know you, but clearly you won't be in before 2023 because we have a full program. Yeah. And even now I've got other things that wouldn't fit in next year that I want to do the year after. And I want to be in America, and I want to go to Australia, to where Rebecca is. We've done the Manchester Art Fair. We're doing that again. We're doing our little thing on the 1st of March for St David's Day in London. But talking to you about representation of the Celts in London, then we need to do something about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think I said this to you when we spoke on the phone a few weeks ago. Like, I really, if ever, walk into a space and go, there's a Scottish artist, or there's a Welsh, there's an Irish artist. It's very, very heavily dominated. But again, same thing applies if I go up to Scotland. It's mostly Scottish artists. And funny, I went for a coffee with this group of people called Artichoke, and they run programs throughout the UK, and they're trying to do this one where they're working with Irish, Scots, English and Welsh artists, and sort of integrate and just introduce different nationality of artists in these different regions. And they were talking, what do you think, there'll be a kickback from it? Do you think we should only show Scottish people in Scotland? And I was like, well, no, because your nationality shouldn't play into how you're received, really. Or maybe that's a question that you ask people when you walk into an exhibition space. What do you think the nationality of this artist is? You won't be able to tell, because why should it be important? Why is that the question? But there's such a lack of representation in spaces where you feel welcome, particularly in England.
Well, I think a lot of it is, what are galleries for? What are they doing? How are you promoting what you do? Because my job is very simple: to foster and grow the artists that we have. So it's not about somebody coming in and saying, I'd like to buy another Bridget Riley to go with my collection, because clearly I'm not going to have Bridget Riley in my stable, but I've got some really brilliant artists, and a lot of them haven't been able to make a living out of it full time. And many of them are now moving towards that because of what we've done in the last year. And that, for me, is really powerful. That's what I've been for, that I've been able to move their prices up almost by 100% in the last year. And they are growing a collector base. So we are getting people coming back and saying, I would like to see what Nathan's doing at the moment. So he's gone from a 450 canvas to an average of 1,100-1,200 canvas. And he's doing, and when I first met him, he didn't do anything very large. And I said, I think we should do something enormous for the opening. And we priced it at £2,000, and we both looked at it and went, but never mind, we'll do it anyway. Somebody fell in love with it. They bought it. We took it to their house. They live in the tiniest maisonette flat. Dominates their living room, and it's a bloody great puffin called the Commander.
Love it.
But out of her window on this maisonette, she has a tiny little balcony, and she can see Puffin Island. So it all works. It all works. So I think never underestimate the people walking through the door. And it's all about accessibility. We've built a relationship with people coming through our door who feel, some of them feel it's quite spiritual and calming and relaxed. And some of them actually just feel it's just so informal, and they don't feel pressurized, and they don't think they have to whisper, and they, some old people say, oh, I could have done that, that's not very good. It's like, yeah, but you didn't, did you? You didn't, you could have put it in the open show, it could be on the wall, but you didn't, somebody else did. So but we have that conversation, we have that dialogue, and that's the bit that's kept me sane in all these restrictions. The fact that I know I can go to a place and, mask or no mask, be in conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about stuff I love. So you go back to the people who feel guilty about not doing their degree subject in their adult life. You'll get there. If it really is your passion, you'll get there. You'll find ways to inch it into the life you have now, and you will develop your network of the future. So the first people who bought the artwork off us last year and for the open show were all the people that we knew in health and social care in the NHS. Because I've always said, tell everybody everything you're doing. Tell everybody. So I was sitting in a council office whilst negotiating with a lawyer over the deal to buy the gallery. So everybody in the bloody room knew I was buying a building to open a gallery. Loads of people have been who are not interested in art in particular. Going, this is nice.
Amazing.
This feels very good. It does help that we're next door to a deli, in fairness, who make fabulous coffee and cake.
And what have you, in terms of community, and because you're in quite a small little town, are you not? Have you?
Yeah, Caernarfon is probably 80% first language Welsh, and which could be a real challenge. I have hired a lady who, Lauren, who works for me, who is first language Welsh, and she laughs at my pronunciation when I give it a go. My goal for 2022 is I was doing quite well before lockdown, but I learned, like my Italian, I learn by talking and pigeoning it and getting away with it. I don't want to write an essay in Welsh, frankly. I just want to be able to siarad, which is chat with people. Siarad Cymraeg is my goal for next year. But we're surrounded by food. So if you like food, it's great. And so every time we have an opening or a preview or anything that I can justify having food and drink at, I work with my neighbours, either the deli or the restaurant at the end of the street. They're all independent businesses around us. The lady who does flowers, done the wreath for the door. She's got a little florist at the end of the street. She does the usual weddings and funerals as a core business, but they're all friends. Yes. The dogs are friends with each other. You know, there's a lady who runs this sort of vintage paraphernalia type, all sorts of stuff that she buys at auctions and car boots and you name it. But you get to know these people. Manon was one of the stars on the equivalents of Coronation Street in Welsh for 17 years.
Really?
Exactly. So of course I've never seen her on TV, but you know, you can see she's bubbling with personality. So got all these fabulous personalities around who have been so welcoming and so kind, and you know, Mariana at the florist, I'll say, how do you say that again? She just said, just say tipyn bach, and they'll be nice to you. But it's kind of a community within a community, because we're all within the town walls of the castle, and within that it's all independent businesses. So we all have to survive by working together to make the streets lively and vibrant, and you know, pushing people towards other people. And you just get to know people by being around. And because I've got the young puppy dog Percy, we're often out in between calls and things, having a quick walk around the town. So everybody knows Percy clearly, and I just I love chatting to people. It's something. My family come from a long line of market traders or artists, and so inevitably I'm the market trading side. I'm not creative enough to be the artist, but it's people. If you don't love people, you shouldn't do our job.
Yeah.
And you've also got to bear in mind that you're not going to agree with everybody, and it doesn't matter.
Well, that's it, and that's something I think comes the longer that you work with people as well. I think sometimes, particularly when I was younger and I used to do like waitressing and things like that, and people would just tell you your whole life story, and which I love. I love that. I think people are so interested. They're so multifaceted. I never think you should pigeonhole yourself. I think this is why when I read Rebecca's email, I was like, you're exactly the type of person that I want on the podcast, because you don't pigeonhole yourself and you haven't decided, okay, well, that's the hand I've been dealt and that I can't do anything about it. You work with it and you can move off, and you want to leave an impact, which I love. But I think, particularly in the art world, people buy from people. Community is so important. And most importantly, I think the people that have run the art world previously, they are a community, but they're an elitist community and they don't let people in. Whereas you and I are both Northern, so there's a way where we love chatting to people. There's that, you want everyone.
Well, we're the mad people. We're the mad people on the tube that smile and talk to you.
100%. Oh my gosh! Do you know? I always say to people, I think actually being Scottish is a bit of a superpower, and I never really understood it until I lived in England. And I was brought up in a house. My mum's a primary school teacher, and she was one of these women that she would stand in the queue at Tesco, and she would be 3 people away from the cashier, and she'd start a conversation with the cashier. And then the conversation would sort of kick back, and then the whole queue would be chatting, and then the cashier next to us would start, and then before we know it, we would have a mass conversation between 3 checkouts. And I used to be like, why do you do this, Mum? But it's a skill. It's an absolute skill to get people chatting, which I think is so important when you work in the art world, because it's all about sharing opinions and what you think about things. And it isn't, like I always say to people, you know, it doesn't matter if you like a painting because it's blue or you don't like it because it's blue. It's still a valid opinion. Let's have there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, have a conversation about it and feel you are welcome in these spaces. But I think ultimately what I'm trying to come round to is these spaces need to be more welcoming, be less sort of door-like.
Well, our thing's always been about, it's got to be accessible. You've got to want to be here. You've got to want to chat. If you don't want to chat, you can just wander around and leave. That's fine too. But most people want to hang out for a bit. And, you know, I'm like, I always say to Lauren, I'm like your worst nightmare parent at a disco, aren't you? I go out and go, don't look through the window. Come on in, it's warmer. It's like, oh no, she's doing that again. Wouldn't she stop doing that? But she got used to me now after a year. But it is that a lot of this as well is the artists spend so much time on their own that their ability to come and hang out together. You know, I get Jocelyn and Nathan upstairs in their studio mucking about, talking about paint and how you get that look and how to do that bit and how to do that bit. The two of them have never worked so hard as they did at the show at Manchester Art Fair. And when you bear in mind, when I first met Nathan nearly 2 years ago, he was so anxious. He had a stammer. He could barely string a sentence together. Now he's up in his studio on our top floor, painting away, chatting to people as they come in. He's our artist in residence. When we opened, I said to him, somebody's here who's bought something off your Facebook, desperate to meet you. And he went, oh, I can't see them. I won't know what to say. So just stand next to me. I won't be. And he literally just said, hi, nice to see you, and then ran off. Manchester Art Fair, I was talking to people and saying, of course, Nathan here has painted all of these wonderful seascapes over here, and Jocelyn here has done all this interesting stuff around Manchester's Northern Quarter. So I'll leave you all to talk to, are you the artist? Oh, this is so amazing. And, you know, it obviously is good for their ego, but it's also just makes them feel valued in a way that they probably didn't. I can't tell you how many of them don't know how to price anything, and they don't know what their value is, and they, you know, and we come away from Manchester and they go, can we do it again? Okay, not just this week, but yes.
I need a breather.
My feet are not speaking to me. But yeah, so that for me is, if I can get a group, I've always loved a little tribe, and I've tried to create that wherever I've worked. And I've got lots of friends who might have been clients actually, but people who within my widest network are followers of us now. And, you know, I've got sort of different parts of the countryside who will come to different things. And people who have made a little pilgrimage when they were vaguely in the area on holiday to come and see my little gallery. And it's just wonderful.
Yeah, well, I want to come see you in the.
Well, you're very welcome. You're very, very welcome.
I would love to come see it. And it sounds such a lovely community. And like you said, I love this idea of a tribe, and that you all work together as independent owners and businesses to sort of ping pong business and direct people between each other. I think that's really important, and kind of comes full circle to what you were saying earlier about what you didn't like about the corporate world. It's kill or be killed. And the art world can seem like that at times, and that's something I don't think it needs to be.
No, and I think so it's funny actually. In certain circumstances, I do go back to my alpha female position, but as Rebecca would say, I was very alpha female when she first met me. I have softened considerably, I believe. But I worked in those retail property business environments where I invariably was the only woman on the board. And I mean, I used to go to budget meetings at the end of March, and I'd go, it's my birthday this week. I intend to win big. I will be taking no prisoners. Now, I wouldn't even think of saying that now. But I think it's, I do like working with men. I really do. And one of the things I find frustrating with some women is we have a terrible habit of wanting to have perfected something before we start. Thinking it all through, polishing it beautifully, and everyone else has left the room and carried on. Men will say yes to a job when they've got about 30% understanding of what it is. We want to be 85%, 90% sure. Now, I'm more of a 70%. I'd like to be about 70% of how this is all going to work and then start. Because it won't be perfect and things will go wrong and you'll have to change. I think experience helps you do that. But what I'd like to give to other women in business is that understanding that you don't have to be brilliant and you don't have to be better than all the men in the room anymore. You just have to have a little bit more guts. And I was at a lunch last week, and this made me laugh. You know, I'm in a frock, I've got pink hair, and I'm just delivering paintings to one of the guests at the lunch. Sit next to this guy, we're halfway through, we're getting to the end of the main course, and he says to me, and it's a northern environment, so you know, he's not PC on any level. Nice guy, but he just says to me, you see, you're not really a girly girl, are you? You're definitely a businessman that goes toe to toe. And I went, yeah. I said, I did have in the 90s a Dutch boss who said to me that I was like a bloke in a skirt. And I've always taken that as a compliment. Because, you know, that's about saying you're one of us. And at the time, there were no HR departments. I couldn't complain to anybody if I didn't like that. You know, you go with the culture you're in at the time. And that I have learned over many years, the culture I kind of want to foster. I want a culture where we're all doing it, we're all in it together, we're working really hard, we're not clock watching, but there's a load of fun involved.
And I think life full colour sounds like that. It really does.
I think we are definitely aiming to be like that. We want to be totally inclusive. I mean, Rebecca, God love her, allows me to talk about Stephen, you know, 10 years after he has left the place. And to the extent that she's always felt that he still has an influence on my thinking. I often go and do what would you do? And he always used to say to other people, she could run the nation, you know, she could be bothered. But it's the one and only person that's had absolutely unconditional confidence in my abilities, which is great. And I try and retain that. But when we opened this art space, she said it needs to be, this is the time to remember Stephen. So she came up with the Doctor's Art House, because Dr. McKee, and the dual aspect that he was a huge Doctor Who fan. So the logo actually has a little sonic screwdriver.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So can you tell the listeners what the Doctor's Art House is about and what does it offer the community?
So it's all part of the Life Full Colour stable, but what we found is Life Full Colour over the last year has become so much of a painting and art, fine art sort of venue that people want to come and see and buy art, that we haven't got the space to do workshops, classes, and everybody all the time has been saying, are you going to do drawing classes, are you going to do painting classes, will you be doing ceramics, will you be doing such and such? So I just have this long list all the time of what everybody tells me. And Gwynedd Council have been investing in culture and the arts over a long period now, and they've just opened this whole new venue down by the harbour side in Caernarfon. So it's right next to the castle, and the old harbour master's slate buildings. So it's called Slate Quay. I will say it in Welsh, Cei Clechi. I won't try that again. Anyway, so we've taken units in there, a couple of units in there, which all plate glass windows. And in there, we will be running a course from probably the third week of January. We're doing creative writing. We're doing creative writing for well-being, actually, which is great. So we want it to be an arts and a well-being space. We're doing paint and prosecco for ladies after work.
Oh, love that.
So it's more of a, don't worry about the quality of the daub, just come for the charade and the glass of wine. And then we will have a course of drawing. We'll have a course of painting, learning how to use colours. We've got a lady who's going to do a course of mosaics. One of our core artists, Anne Lewis, does lino printmaking. So, and there's loads of people who want to know how to do that. So we've got 2 full-day courses happening on that. She can do them in Welsh and in English, so that's really popular. So yeah, building from there really. Any kind of thoughts you have. We've got a ceramics lady coming in. We've got a glass maker who's going to show us how to do stained glass. And a lot of it, we opened for the Christmas markets at the end of November, and we just had people queuing up to sign for adult classes. And then we had teenagers who really not getting what they want out of arts classes at school, not being treated as though they're any good. So we want to foster that and encourage that, because, you know, Nathan will tell you he flunked his A-levels, but he got a first-class degree from John Moores in his fine arts, and it's taken him till he was in his 40s to actually really get going. And we're doing it together. It's really hard by yourself. We do it together.
Can't help but feel and compare this to, you sound like you're on a mission to sort of create your own little St. Ives artistic community. This is what it sounds like, and it's so exciting. I love that you're, as well as having a gallery, you've thought of how you can impact or just contribute creatively to so many different streams of the community, you know, from young people at high school to, I mean, I grew up in a really small town. I wouldn't have fathomed that I would have been able to have gone to a drawing course or a stained glass course, or even after university. I mean, okay, when I was at university at Glasgow, I could do life drawing once a week in this weird little pub in the West End of Glasgow, which I loved. But I just, no, it sounds like you're on a mission to do the work.
Well, I've got a really great community of art, not just the artists who we do a solo show for, but all the other artists who contribute to our kind of more eclectic mix of art that we sell. And they just got loads of suggestions. So when I got this building, they just said, "Are you moving the gallery?" And I went, no, that the gallery is doing its thing, and this needs to do something else. And they've all got loads of ideas, and they also know that I don't cook. I'm not a domestic. My husband was the domestic god, so it's all a bit, you know, Heath Robinson here. Somebody came to say the other day, and they said, "It's true, you only have cheese in your fridge." I do. But they're always asking me out over to their place for food and just hanging out and talking about things and what we're going to do next. Well, we can't get framing done really efficiently and effectively and quickly, so we'll set up a framing business next year.
Amazing.
So I'm going to recruit an apprentice to do that. We're getting to know more photographers. We've got a great show that's doing the tours called Shorelines that'll be coming to us at the end of first time it's been to Wales. So we're attracting things now that, a bit like your artichoke, was it?
Yeah.
Or, did I get that right? What we're trying to do is say, this is what we do here. We look at artists and we ask them if they'd like to work with us. We get other artists coming towards us, but there's always that other thing. So, you know, I want to go to New York because my cousin is the dean of the New York Studio School of Art. And I met him before. I mean, he's not my father, he's in his 70s, but he's a brilliant live active artist. He's been over there since the early 80s. I went over and said, "I want to open a gallery." And he looked at me and went, "Do it, do everything." And he was like bouncing around so sprightly. I was supposed to go last year, and of course, COVID got in the way. But I want to go over next year, travel permitting, to rekindle the conversations we were having. Because he said to me, "What you need is an artist in residence." So I said to Nathan, "Do you fancy being my artist in residence?" That has just been a stonker because people love seeing an artist. He also suggested that I have one of his alumni from New York to come over. Well, you start to think of the transfer of skills and let's have a Celtic show in Greenwich in New York. It will take us 3 years to put together, but you and I could do that. We could pull that together and make it happen.
Oh, would love that. Yeah.
But that for me is that's what entrepreneurialism is all about. It happens to be working with stuff that we love, but nothing is too difficult. Nothing is out of our reach. We can go anywhere we want in the world, frankly.
No, absolutely.
And that, if it's in Caernarfon is base camp, and Caernarfon is where I walk down the street and people know me, and that's lovely, and I love that. I love being that part of the thing. But that's not going to stop me going to all the different places in the world I've been before. So my friend Justine, who lives in Jerusalem, is very keen for me to go over there and see some of the artists that are showing in Tel Aviv, because they're very different again. Well, great. Well, why don't we bring some of those over here? And where will be the best place to showcase their work? There's just so much art everywhere. It's the bond that ties us together, doesn't it? In any nation, there's creativity.
Well, that's it. And it's funny. I was going to say to save this conversation being about 3.5 hours long.
Sorry,
no, not at all. My final question that I ask everybody, and it's quite a big one, and you've kind of really touched on it. Really, is why is art important? And for you, I think you've just kind of nailed it there, though. Like, it's the creativity is the thing that runs through everybody.
I think, and I wrote a blog about it quite a few years ago now, before I even started the gallery. I think I've always been able to hold on to that 8-year-old's view that I could be an astronaut, that belief that anything is possible. I then had it battered out of me like we all do in secondary school. It then had a little spark at university, and I then joined this bunch of creative lunatics that work in advertising, working with copywriters and art directors. And I'm standing on the Manchester Art Fair stand, and the creative director of one of the agencies I left in 92 walked past, and I went, "Pete?" And he turned around and he went, "Sara McKee, Pink Care, what the bloody hell are you doing here?" I said, "I've opened an art gallery." "Of course you have." Came over. I had a pop-up of our logo, and he said, "Oh, very Mondrian. Oh yes, I see the art history's coming through now." Now, I have not seen that man since the early 90s. And I have obviously talked about what I love all the way through. And I do think it's the visual world, it's art, it's music, it's that whole part of the creative life that we live. Even if we just listen to music and we don't do any of it ourselves, people listen to the radio all day. People are involved in culture in some form everywhere in the world. They'll hum in the shower, there's just that bit that I think runs as a theme through everybody, and you can find it. And if you can open it up, and if you can actually say to teenagers, you don't need to listen to your teachers. Of course you're creative. You can do whatever you like. You're going to be working till you're 100 anyway, so you might as well do something you like. For me, it's bring everything. Don't live a work-life balance. Live a whole life, and live a whole life with lots of colour. I paint my walls yellow and green. My office is orange. I can do that with confidence because bright colours make me zing. And I just like to think that we can have much more zing in the world if we have art with us. So to be 10 years on, widow of the parish, painting my hair pink, living in North Wales, and still feeling as though I've got a purpose, that I've got purpose, I've got the reason to get up in the morning, I've got a great tribe. I may live with a geriatric dachshund and a year-old mad scruff. But do you know what? My heart is full. My heart is full because I get to do what I love every day. I mean, you can't really beat that, can you?
No, not at all. And no, I mean, envious and just.
We should collaborate more.
Oh,
we should
I
collaborate
mean,
more.
yeah, I would love to. I mean, I just feel, even listening to you, like I feel so inspired to go and do and make and think about things in another way. But Sarah, I've absolutely loved talking to you.
Me too.
And I cannot wait to release this episode and everyone to hear this. And yeah, we need more people like you in the art world. We do, just championing and opening it up and making it inclusive and showing people, particularly communities, that it's important and that what they make is worthy. And yeah, just to not pigeonhole themselves, and there's always a purpose, and just run at life with full color. I love it. Where can people connect with you and find you on socials and websites and stuff?
I'm on Twitter. I know how to do Twitter best. Life Full Colour is on everything: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn if people are in business. And our website is very simply lifefullcolour.com. So lots of different ways to connect with us.
Amazing. And I'll leave links to all of that in the show notes. Sarah, I have loved talking to you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, you're very welcome. And notwithstanding the podcast, do keep in touch, because I do like this Celtic idea.
Absolutely.
So there may be a cunning plan in there somewhere.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to. I mean, it's